All right, guys, I got 5 pages of notes for this video, so it's going to be intense. If you're here, you're probably really familiar with one of these two projects, Flux or ThreeFold. So I'm going to go over both of these in a decently deep amount of detail so that fans of either project are familiar with, I guess you could almost call it competition, and you will hopefully be able to see that it's more than just competition. There's actually a lot of opportunities here for us to work together to achieve some of the same goals. Before we get into it, I just want to say that I'm going to say good and bad things about both projects. If you're the type of person that just downvotes and gets mad when your own project gets badmouth, then you're the kind of dogmatic shill that sort of ruins the crypto space for everyone. So you can see on the left and right side, left side, decentralized Web 3 computational network. On the right side, decentralized internet from the ground up. So what does that exactly mean? Um, you're probably familiar with cloud providers like AWS, Azure, even Alibaba has cloud services. At its most rudimentary level, both of these projects are a decentralized data center where you can rent workloads, and as a capacity provider, you can own servers and rent out those servers. Now, I know both have more to it than that, particularly ThreeFold has a whole ecosystem building around it, but we're going to keep it sort of at the base layer here to compare the two projects. A frequent criticism of anything that is being decentralized is why? Why are you decentralizing it? There's no reason. Well, cloud providers are a $200 billion a year market with AWS with a huge lion's share. And when you have all of literally the world's app power, internet power, everything power running on a relative handful of data servers, it's just bad security. It's not secure, it's easy to take down, it's easy to censor, et cetera, et cetera. Um, One of the first things the Russians struck in Ukraine, which actually has a lot of data centers, was their data centers. Imagine if there was no data center, but every house was their own server. Believe it or not, that is what the original founders of the internet proposed. It was envisioned that everyone had their own mail server. As it would turn out, that all got centralized into data centers. But now, with the barrier to entry to tech so low and tech literacy so high, these two companies are pushing to change that back to the original promise. Um, so that's really the main goal of each of these companies. Now, what Flux and Threefold are not, they're not just another storage project. They're not File. They're not SC Coin. They're not SC Prime. Comparing these projects is like comparing a literal hard drive to a 50-pound, $2,000 server. They're just not the same thing. They're on whole different levels. I'm going to get real here. There is no reason for a storage only project to exist. Those are all running on servers. Why not just have a project running those servers and then you can deploy your own backup software on that server, or third party can do that for you. Threefold has its own built-in software to do that, but third parties can also deploy such software on Flux or on Threefold. So not the same thing. Don't get them confused, and don't say, well, why not just use Filecoin? They're not the same. On that same note, I should have had this chart up before. Here's just a little overview of what I was talking about, how these projects are not the same. You could probably add Flux right here um, with just about the same things checked, more or less. Debatable if they could check network or DApp on Flux, since I don't think they have their own native dApps. Um, Now, Akash is actually more similar to Threefold and Flux than this chart might indicate, but given Akash's inability to deliver on their promises or even deliver their hardware, I am not going to include them in this conversation. Let's compare the network size of each project to get an idea of how big each one of these projects is. Left, we have Flux, right, Threefold. Total cores of Flux is almost 100,000. and over at ThreeFold, it's a little over 60,000. That might initially make you think Flux is larger, but let's keep going and look at some other metrics here. The total RAM is 271 terabytes, and wow, almost 450 terabytes of RAM over at ThreeFold. Solid state, almost 6 petabytes with Flux, and a little over 9 over at ThreeFold. Hard disk drive, 100 terabytes, and 33 petabytes over at ThreeFold. So what that tells you is, and it's self-evident from the offerings that Flux sells, is that has more less powerful as far as RAM and SSD goes compared to ThreeFold. ThreeFold has less cores but beefier machines, so just kind of different networks out there. Um, the ThreeFold grid is more similar to professional data centers where you have heavy servers with a lot of RAM and storage attached as compared to Flux, which seems to be a little lighter on those assets. Now, an interesting aspect here, I mean, let's be honest, they're both ballpark the same, right? But Flux has multiple times the market cap compared to ThreeFold. Just something to keep in mind. Maybe I hate to self-plug here, but um, theoretically, something with a similar network size would at least be more similar in market cap, you would think. Let's check out what it's actually like to deploy a workload on each of these projects. Over here at Flux, I checked out their apps. So Flux launches Docker images only. You're constrained to things that are Docker images, which is, you know, the easiest way to launch something. Um, and they have a very extensive list here. Definitely curated towards Web3 and crypto, but not just that. They have all sorts of different things here, like SyncTube and whatnot. Now that is markedly different than your normal cloud provider where you have complete liberty to run whatever you want, however you want. For those of you familiar with the different offerings out there in the cloud space, you might recognize that just offering Docker images is very similar to DigitalOcean's Droplet Marketplace, where they have an enormous list of images that you can launch with just a single click. And believe me, there are hundreds here. Have to search for them. It's a fantastic thing to use. I use it quite frequently myself. Not discounting it as a feature set. It is just a little different than what everyone offers, but a fantastic way to get running fast and efficiently. One of the most unique things about launching on Flux is a mandatory triple redundancy on the instance that you are running. And that is somewhat in a way mandatory when you don't have the 999 459's reliability that DigitalOcean would have, but you are running on relatively unknown hardware. So you have that they're not really backups, but they increase your uptime. Minimum of 3, and you have to pay as you increase your amount of instances running. On the flip side, over at the ThreeFold Playground, it is more like a traditional cloud provider where the meat and potatoes is just launching an Ubuntu or similar virtual machine. Um, and just like anywhere else, you select your cores, your memory, and if you want your attached disk size. Um, Something unique about launching a virtual machine here is that you have the option of selecting a public IP address if it's available on the node you want to select, or the planetary network, which is a IPv6 static network that is available even from computers at home without a public IP block, which is a great way to get static IPs without paying for them, as well as numerous other features I don't fully understand with that. And just like on any other cloud provider, you have a selection of ready to go um, apps here. Now, keep an eye out in the future. You might see Flux show up right here. There is no default backups or multiple instances on ThreeFold like there is on Flux. You would have to manually set that up using a Kubernetes cluster. If you are a cloud guy, this is not a big deal, but if you're a novice, it is not as easy to set up as it is on Flux. However, third parties are welcome to build on top of the ThreeFold network where they do earn a portion of the proceeds funneled through them. So in theory, in the future, default multiple instances could be possible from a third-party provider. Let's get into the little more exciting part of this video, the actual hardware and profitability behind each project. Let's start out with Flux. They are largely based on this three-tier system where you have minimum hardware requirements, including decently tough CPU and bandwidth requirements. That is very admirable and ensures that you have really good stuff online. A distinct, a unique thing here is that they allow VPS in addition to your own hardware. As we talked about, if you don't know what a VPS is, VPS is sort of the main bread and butter of those services we talked about earlier at AWS and so on and so forth. If you're running your decentralized network on a centralized network, you're not decentralized anymore. Good news is, from what I've caught on a lot of the community chats with Flux, is that they are aware of that, which is cool. Little note to you guys out there watching this with Flux, ThreeFold is a decentralized VPS. Keep an eye out in the next coming weeks, and I'm going to show you how to run your node on ThreeFold. If you can't, now, something that I think is unusual is the really high collateral requirements required for each of these. The collateral for my threefold farm would actually be well over $2 million. Actually, I think now, since it's grown since I did that math, probably more like 3 million. And this is not slashed, from my understanding, with unsatisfactory uptime. So I don't really know the purpose of it. If you do know, please let me know below. It kind of seems like a way to keep the token price high, but I would be happy to be proved wrong there. If you can't afford those requirements above, they do have staking nodes where it sounds like you contribute some tokens and kind of get like a share on a server. That's a pretty neat aspect that opens it up to everybody. Flux has this fantastic dashboard to look at resources and their economics, including the profitability. I'm happy to see that the Flux token is going crazy the last couple of days. For a while, the cumulus rewards were negative, but they're back to being positive. And you can see the different profitabilities for each type here. Can be pretty substantial with the biggest node. I'm not really going to attempt to compare ROI between the two projects because it's kind of sort of a fool's errand because this collateral requirement is a whole nother variable, basically forces market exposure. So I can't really compare. Forcing market exposure could be really good or really bad. It could go either way. If you're getting in right now a little over $1, I imagine it would be a really good thing. But if you started a node when it was at $4 or not or close to 4, it wouldn't be such a great thing. As far as I'm aware, there is no uptime requirements to people operating Flux nodes. You just don't earn while you're offline, which I suppose is somewhat acceptable giving their minimum of 3 instances on each workload. My biggest criticism of Flux would be that they're proof of work. Believe me, I'm a big proof of work fan. I mine Monero, and I think it's great for Bitcoin or Monero to be proof of work. I don't understand the need to have such a high security protocol and essentially what is money just for hosting services. One of my biggest criticisms of Flux would be that it's proof of work. Believe me, I'm a big proof of work fan. I mine Monero. I believe it's the best thing for Bitcoin and Monero, but I don't understand the need for that high security protocol with what is just shortly held cash essentially for the purchase of cloud capacity. So all GPUs on Flux are being used for hash power. Now I'm going to use this as my segue to move over to looking at threefold. Since threefold is not proof of work and is actually a multi-chain token, just like Flux is. While there are no GPUs yet on the threefold network, they are going to be added soon, but for their computational power. GPU chipsets are fantastic for AI and machine learning, and you can actually rent them on Linode, which if you're look at a lot of cloud stuff on YouTube, you're familiar with because they sponsor a lot of content creators. So I believe the beginning of next year, GPUs are going to be supported on threefold, but not for their hash power. We don't know yet what the rewards would be like for the GPUs, but it is just another similarity between Flux where you can move your GPUs over. Back over at the Flux tiers, um, you'll see each tier is a different number of threads. The base of each one is threads, RAM, and SSD, because that is the core computational power of a server, are those three resources. So just like here, over at Threefold, there aren't tiers. It's a fully infinite spectrum here of what you can bring online. You're rewarded purely based on the resources you have. There is a golden ratio of RAM, threads, and solid state that is your computational units. Those are the most profitable. Any extra SSD is rewarded, and any hard drives you have online are also rewarded, but lesser than solid states. We have a ton of hard drives on the network. I would say close to 100% of that are refugees from Chia, including myself, including some major YouTubers out there. Um, a lot of people have left Chia and brought that capacity online to threefold because it is probably one of the best paying programs for hard drives currently. So you plug in all your resources here and you get your TFT per month here. Um, on the low end, you can expect, for a cheap under 1,000 build, about 350. Meanwhile, a lot of us with big servers are getting 3,500 per server for something that costs maybe 2,000 to build. So it's all over the place. Flux has, I'm assuming, difficulty in a 2.5 year halvening cycle, which is traditional for profitability models. Meanwhile, over at Threefold, you are locked in to your TFT per month for a period of 5 years. You will always earn that as long as you keep your uptime promises. While I'm here, you have to keep 95 or 99% uptime, depending on your type of node, or you do not earn anything for that month. That's the incentive for good uptime. So yeah, I got sidetracked a second there. Back at the price of TFT, that is, you can kind of think of that as your starting difficulty. Um, the price of TFT is actually not really the market price. It's somewhat decided on by the community, and it never goes down. So at 8 cents, this random build that defaults here earns 386. Now let's say you registered at 16, your earnings per month are half of that. So it's linear. This incentivizes being an early adopter on the network. So it's sort of assumed that the price of TFT more or less always moves in an upwards or sideways trajectory. As I'm recording this, TFT is about 5 cents. So we are earning a little less than, well, really would be optimal at the current time, but we are recovering on that. So while this is somewhat working against us at the moment, it also can really work for you because let's say TFT went to 50 cents, I would still be earning 386 TFT a month, but it would be much more valuable. This has definitely incentivized a lot of people, including myself, to get as much capacity online as fast as possible. Probably one of the biggest operational differences between Threefold and Flux is that Threefold is bare metal only. Not only a reformatted drive, but a wiped drive. Threefold does not run on VMs like Flux can. And that is designed to make the centralization present in a VPS impossible to do. It's actually not impossible, you just don't earn anything when you're doing that. That is a very strict rule with Threefold. I think it's fantastic though that Flux allows DIY while so many other projects in the hardware space do not allow that. That's super cool of them that they started out that way and looks like even moving stronger towards it. I will also mention that Threefold has a program where you can get 25% more earnings per month if you run a certified threefold, what we call three nodes. And these have a signed image on them and secure boot enabled for an increased security of the workloads running on them. Um, those of us in any project know setting up a server is sometimes hairy. These are plug and earn devices, and these are going to be really great devices to run Flux workloads on because you can plug these in at home, earn your TFT per month, and deploy your Flux node on them, and earn from that. You'll be double dipping, and you won't be paying that many TFT per month to host on them because you're deploying on your own capacity. Just one angle. This is off topic, but I'm really going to dive into that in another video in a couple weeks. So let's have a recap on these two projects before we end the video. Both of these projects are currently occupying a pretty similar space. As they each develop, they're probably going to move a little bit into different realms since Threefold is going to be really network based as they build out their own sort of quote unquote internet, and Flux is more going in like the Docker image route. But right now, they're close enough to compare. Flux is market ready. They have awesome partnerships. They are just got back or for the first time into the top 100, which is amazing. Threefold is still under rapid development. They're a lot smaller on their team and community size, um, but they are getting there, and they're gonna have a more market ready product. Basically all the time it's more market ready. If you're looking to get involved with either of them, I hope this video helped you choose. Either of these companies or projects are, as far as crypto-esque projects to get in on, are like the most legit you can be, right? They actually have something behind them. They're actually doing something. They're not just existing to exist. Either of them are really optimal places to put your time and money in. If you have any questions with either of them, post below, and I'm sure people from either community will chime in. Keep an eye out in the next coming weeks for running Flux on Threefold as I figure that out. And luckily, I got myself a little stash of Flux before the recent mooning, so that definitely made it cheaper for me.